Welcome back to another episode of Digest with Jasmynn. I'm Jasmynn, your favorite registered-dietitian nutritionist, dishing all the nutrition topics. A couple of months ago, I released a video about carbs and understanding them because they typically get a bad reputation, like nobody likes carbs. But I really wanted you guys to really just understand why carbs are essential and, why they're really good for you. But today I wanted to talk about what happens when you have what could happen. I want to specify that because this isn't a one size fit all video. But what could possibly happen if you continue to have just an inconsistent carb intake? Let's chat. Carbs are an essential nutrient and we need them for energy, to breathe, to text, to walk, to chat, to tweet, and everything else. So you need carbs. But what really happens when you have an inconsistent amount of intake per meal? And don't worry guys, I'm going to leave some really great examples in the show notes. So if you're taking notes, if you're a visual learner, I'm going to have all the numbers that we talk about below today. And I'm going to be giving some different examples today too. So be on the lookout. They're going to be good. So when our carb intake is inconsistent, it has a really huge impact on our blood glucose, or also known as blood sugar. So here's the first example. We're going to talk about like your carb intake, and specifically only your carbs today. We're not going to focus on protein or fat because that'll just make the conversation like really crazy, and I'm not here to do that today. So we're only going to talk about carbs today. So for this example, we're going to talk about your carb intake at each meal: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So say that you had 35 grams of carbs at breakfast, you had 15 grams of carbs at lunch, and then you had 93 grams of carbs at dinner. Let's just say you're putting your insulin to work. So why does insulin matter in this? So here's a little A&P lesson. So your pancreas creates insulin, right? And the insulin's role in the body is to be released by the pancreas, and it goes into the bloodstream and it catches the glucose. And I'm acting like I got like little cattles because I'm from Texas. That's what we do. Not really. I never catch no cattle, y'all. But really, so what insulin does is it's released into the bloodstream and it catches all the glucose and it brings it back into the muscle for later use. So when it's inconsistent, you're really making that demand for your insulin production like through the roof. And here's just another example. If you guys are SpongeBob watchers, I grew up watching SpongeBob. Think about that episode when like he forgot his name, and it was like all those SpongeBobs in his brain. That's essentially how insulin is when you have that inconsistent carb intake. So say that you have that 35 grams at breakfast and you're like, okay. And your pancreas like, go out there, insulin, go do your job. And they're like, okay, that's cool, 35. And then at lunch you have 15 grams and they're like, that's not a lot, but we'll send what's needed. And then for dinner you have 93. And they're like running around like, we don't even have that much insulin. Like we wasn't even prepared. So that's sort of like what happens when you're thinking about when your carb intake is inconsistent. And over the years of just having this inconsistent carb intake throughout the day, it could lead to prediabetes or type 2. Because again, the role of insulin is to go and bring in that blood glucose. But what happens with pre-diabetics and individuals with type 2 diabetes is their insulin either doesn't work properly anymore or they don't produce it. Therefore, they just have all of that blood sugar all that sugar just in their blood like rolling around really crazy. So really, that's what happens. And I just wanted to kind of give you guys that background so you could be a little bit more aware. So what can you do when you're actually trying to be mindful of your carb intake? I'm going to give you another example, but how could you be a little bit more consistent and mindful with your carb intake Well, it really depends on a lot of different factors: your height, your weight, your age, your gender, your activity level. But really, when it comes to, how much carbs you should have at, one meal, and we're just going to base this off a healthy adult, that's between 45 grams and 60 grams. And it ranges, again. You may have a little bit lower, it may be a little bit higher, but typically we always recommend between 45 grams to 60 grams at your traditional meals. So your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then at your snack, you usually half it. So say that you're having about, 50 grams of carbs at your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you will want your snacks to probably be in that range of like 15 to 25. And that's just going to help your insulin production be pretty consistent, so it's not so sporadic and the demand is high. And that's also going to help with your blood sugar too, because again, if you're having that consistent carb intake throughout the day, your insulin's not going to feel like so sporadic and like, oh my god, I only had to produce so much for this morning, and now I have to produce so much for dinner. And I'm giving your insulin and your body such personality. But typically, really, that is the goal, is to make sure that you're just staying within these ranges of 45 to 60 grams at those traditional meals, and then about half in it at your snacks. Another way that you can do it is making sure that your plate is pretty balanced, making sure that you have some adequate healthy fats on your plate, making sure that you have some lean protein, because you all just don't want to give yourself just so much carbs, because again, that's still putting that high demand on your insulin. And we want to make sure that we're not, creating like an insulin resistance, like it's like, okay, I'm just going to shut down. So we want to make sure that we're just giving your body all those different variety of foods as well. And I wanted to give you guys an example of how quickly your carb intake can become inconsistent. So we're going to talk about one meal, and it's only going to focus on your carb intake. Then I'm going to talk about a meal that has inconsistent carb intake, and then a meal that has like adequate, the adequate amount that you need. And our meal is going to be chicken fajita tacos with rice and water, because I'm not going to add soda in this, because I just don't want to do that to y'all today. So here's your first meal. So we have your inconsistent meal. And this will consume, and again, we're only going to talk about the carbs. Say that you have 2 flour tortillas at 46 grams of carbs, and you have a half a cup of rice at 18 grams of carbs, and then you have chips and dips, and that's 22 grams of carbs. Adding that all together is 86. So if you remember, you want that range to be in between 45 and 60. So this meal is already at 86. So now your insulin is like, girl, didn't I just tell you 45 to 60 and you got 86? So that's that inconsistent meal, because if you had like your breakfast was like 45, your lunch was like 50, and now you got 86, you got that crazy increase of insulin production. So you can see it's like now here is the adequate meal. So say that you switch those 2 flour for 2 corn tortillas, that's going to be 30 grams of carbs. And say that you just have your regular half a cup of rice, that's going to be 18 grams. And say that you just don't opt for the chips and dip. You're like, nah, I don't want it. So now you're at 48 grams of carbs, and you're fitting within between that meal. And if you're staying consistent throughout the day, now you're going to not have that such, increased demand of insulin production. So I really just wanted to kind of break it down, because carbs do get really a bad reputation, and I can see the hesitation. I can see it. If you really don't understand the background of carb intake and how it's really supposed to be, now you do. It could lead into, those issues like prediabetes and type 2. So if you're feeling like this is so much and you want more information, you can go on my Instagram page and you can click on my link tree. And I have a free 30-minute consultation. So if you have more questions, if you want to work with me, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram and we can get that. And then you can also go to my website. I'll leave that link below. If you want to go just straight to working with me, you can do that too. Your girl would appreciate both. Just so you can get some more information. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and then follow me on Instagram, and then that's where you'll follow my, you can click into the link for my link tree. And if you would like to join my private but free Facebook group, Girls Gone Healthy, please feel free to go to that link tree and join that as well. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and I'm having so much fun doing this, and I will chat with y'all later. Bye.